Hi there, my name is John McTaggart from Talking Blues Police Recruitment Training, and we're the UK's longest running and most successful and largest company specialising in training people to get into the UK police service. This video is one of a number that we use on our course and in terms of open network to actually explain to people the underpinning skills and values that you need to consider when you join the police service. So this one's all about the Competency Value Framework. Okay, so the Competency Value Framework, that doesn't sound very exciting, and how is that relevant to you if you're looking to be a constable in the UK police service? And that's a reasonable point. Well, to begin with, if you don't actually know what the Competency Value Framework is, you need to find out. And it all comes down to actually having a copy for yourself of this document, which is the College of Policing Competency Value Framework. And I'll be referring to that as we go through this presentation. So what we're going to be looking at doing as we actually travel through the presentation is to actually understand what the CVF actually is, the Competency Value Framework, to identify the document itself, to understand the various elements of the CVF, because it sounds a bit confusing when you actually look at it. And most people do tend to read and think, a load of rubbish that. I used to do this actually. It's a load of rubbish. How on earth is that relevant to me? And I get that. And I'm going to explain to you why that's not the case. We're going to look at some examples of behaviours. So they're the kinds of things that you need to display all the way through your recruitment process, particularly in the assessment centre. And we'll have a talk about how that CVF actually fits in with grading your actual scores. So we'll talk about it creating an effective checklist for you. And that's going to be the importance of the CVF. So hopefully you haven't got too fed up so far, because that's what we're going to be talking about. So, okay, so what is the document then? What is the CVF? And then that's a great question. So think about this. Let's just put the whole CVF thing to one side for a moment. So think about how we actually define what is a good police officer. So if we said to you, right, well, you obviously want to be a really, really great police officer, how are you actually going to do that? What does that actually mean to you? And you'd probably say to me, if I asked you that question, well, John, they've got to be transparent, and you've got to show integrity, and you've got to be honest and have a great sense of humour, and come up with very worthy words like that, right? And that's great, that. And you may well be right. Thing is, though, how do you define that? How do you actually put that into words? So when we start talking about integrity, yeah, we all know what integrity is. But actually, if I said to you, explain what it means, how could you? And if you can't explain what it means, then from the police service perspective, and if they couldn't explain what it means, how do they then actually go on marking you? So when they're sitting with candidate A, how do they know that candidate A here has displayed integrity? They'll have a conversation at the end of the interview, and I say, actually, he was really, really good there. She was really, really good at integrity, because there's nothing to judge you by. So what you need is, you need a checklist. You need a checklist of what those behaviours actually look like. And that, my friends, is where the Competency Value Framework actually comes in. So we've got to say to ourselves, how do we then actually define what this good behaviour looks like then? We know we want it, but what does it actually mean? Well, what the job did was, it actually came up with a series of values as to what good would actually look like. What key underpinning beliefs should police officers actually have? And of course, for police officers, read aspiring police officers. And then once we've got those kind of core values which underpin everything, then what does that actually look like? And what they did was, they actually came up with, well, this document and a diagram, which hopefully you will all have seen. And in that diagram, it's a very interesting kind of onion kind of thing. I'm just showing it to you here now, so you can go off and find your own copy of it. Obviously, becoming a course for Talking Blues, we'll actually show you how to copy this. But in essence, what you've got on that document, when you find it, is the 4 values, an explanation of what those values actually are, and what those feed into in terms of competencies. So, for example, the 4 values are the things that as police officers we should seek to be. And they are those 4 there. I hate reading slides. Those 4 things there: transparency, impartiality, if I'm going to do it anyway, public service and integrity. So that's great. So we've got those kind of 4 core values. But what do they actually mean? That's the key question for us. And they then feed into, having aspired to the values that we want to achieve, then we need to look at the competencies and say, well, okay, so how then do we actually display that behaviour? So what does that actually amount to? And what we're saying there is that we want to be those 6, and I'm not going to read those 6, you can read them on the slide yourself, but we want to actually behave in ways that show those 6 kind of characters. So I've got 4 values that I want to show that I have as a candidate. I've got my 4 values, and I need to understand what those 4 values actually mean. That's what I believe. And then I've got 6 competencies, which talks about the ways that I behave or the way that I act. And that's 1 to 6 on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick just one. Right? I'm going to pick, on this occasion, the value of integrity, because integrity underpins everything you will do as a police officer. If you can't be believed, if you are dishonest, if you can't be trusted in everything that you do, then to be honest, you're useless as a police officer. You'll never get believed at court, the jury won't believe you, the judge won't believe you, the public won't believe you, and you've lost faith in the system. You also can't be half full of integrity and half out, because you either have integrity or you don't. You can't be nearly honest, you're either honest or you're not honest. And there's no real degrees of having integrity. But back to my original question, what does integrity actually mean? So we know we need a high mark for integrity. We need to live by this value, but what does that actually mean? And if you look at this document, the CVF, and you look under integrity, what it's saying to you is this. I've changed this a little bit, using the exact same words. But what we're saying is that you will live your life by the values of the police service, right, and the code of ethics. Of course, you know all about the police service code of ethics because you've downloaded a copy. If you haven't, then you need to. Something else we covered on the course. We want you to know that in a difficult kind of situation, you will do the right thing. Okay, well, will you? What is the right thing? Is the right thing looking after your colleagues, even if they're in the wrong? I don't know. Acting as a role model. So, do you know what we actually mean by a role model? When you are looking at the behaviours of your colleagues, never mind yourself, would you actually challenge those particular comments? If you see the sergeant making a comment in public, perhaps about somebody's gender, race, religion, sexuality, would you know how to challenge that? Because your example and interview to us will have to show us that you know how to do that. Do you think about the way that you've done it? And if somebody were to say to you, after you've made that challenge, have you thought about this? Are you open to that kind of suggestion? Do you put yourself in situations whereby your integrity is likely to be called into question or to potentially be called into question? During COVID lockdown, numbers of politicians and public leaders have put themselves in positions whereby, although they have said later on, well, I didn't really break the rules, they've been preaching the rules about COVID and were clearly found to have not been following the rules of COVID, and their integrity is gone. Because how can you stand there on a public stage and say you must follow the rules if you yourself don't? And it's not a matter of scale, it's a matter of absolute devotion to those particular values. Do you act within the definition of your job and the law? Sort of goes without saying, hopefully. And do you use the right level of resources to actually do whatever it is you're trying to achieve? And do you act in a manner that is selfless, in a manner that actually puts others before yourself? So that's what the police service defines as integrity. So they've taken that concept that at the start of the talk we couldn't actually define, and they've converted it into a series of statements. And what that amounts to effectively, folks, is a checklist. Because what we've got there now is a list of things that can be ticked off as a marker in your interview or in your briefing exercise, in your presentation exercises, and in a situational judgment test, which is all part of the current assessment. And that lets us actually create a checklist of things that you, the candidate, need to have done. And the important bit of that is that it lets you, as the candidate, look at all the various values and the various competencies and create your own checklist. Once you've created that checklist, then what you can do is hold up your interview answers when you're preparing those, when you're looking at potential interview answers, because of course you're going to do that, aren't you? You have thought, well, okay, what examples am I going to use and how am I going to hold them up to those particular checklists? And then you need to understand, of course, what each point on a checklist actually means. And that's where the CVF actually comes into its own. Okay, so it's a very, very important document, and we hammer this on the course, but people do struggle with the concept of it all. Ultimately, you do need to understand that, because that is the definition of each of those competencies and values. So I went through on the previous slide a list of one particular value of integrity, but those lists exist for each of the 4 values and each of the 6 competencies. And that's how simple the Competency Value Framework is. And there's another thing there about clusters. Cluster is just where they take certain of the values and lump them together, but it's of no real consequence. It's just a heading and a way of lumping things together. Key things are the values and the competencies. And if you understand that, then you are well on your way to being able to prepare. The next stage in your preparation is to actually understand what each bullet point, what each one of those actual statements means to you. So we're saying be a role model. Do you fully understand what a role model actually is in the policing context? Not necessarily the same as your context. Okay, feel free to put any comments on or give us a like if you wouldn't mind, if you think it's been any help at all. And have a look at our website, talkingblues.co.uk, and there's some other information and free videos on there as well. Okay, good luck in your application, and you know, if you ever stop us speeding, then you'll know how to do the right thing, won't you? As we always say. Okay, take care.